Hello and welcome back to Identity Architects, the podcast that's dedicated to spotlighting individuals who are changing the way that data is used to deliver better customer experiences. I'm your host, Ben Cicchetti, and for this episode, our VP of Product Marketing, Devon DeBlasio, spoke to Chris Hawk, Director of Media Strategy and Investment Performance at Papa John's International. Devon and Chris have an awesome discussion about their approach to collaboration, the future of data-driven media strategies, the role of technology such as data cleanrooms in that future, and much, much more. Before I hand it over to Devon and Chris, just a reminder to hit that subscribe button wherever you enjoy podcasts so you know when the next episode of Identity Architects lands. But now, without any further delay, here's Devon and Chris.
Hello, I'm Devon DeBlasio, InfoSum's Vice President of Product Marketing. I'm extremely excited to be joined by Chris Hawk, Director, Media Strategy and Investment Performance at Papa John's International. Chris, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm great. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me, Devon.
Really glad for you to be on the show, talking with us. And full disclosure, Chris and I go ways back as prior colleagues in a formal life at a formal job. But we're going to jump in and talk about all things brand side, identity, clean rooms, media strategy, the whole nine. But first, I want to give Chris the chance to introduce himself. He has a very, very vast and wide experience on the brand side, the agency side, the vendor side. He really has covered all sides of the media coin, I guess you could say, three-sided coin. But Chris, just tell the audience, who you are, where you work, what you do, and kind of where you came from to get here.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm currently the Director of Media Strategy and Investment Performance at Papa John's International, based in Atlanta. My position is all things data and measurement. I know we're going to get a lot more into that, so I won't dwell. I'm someone who moved to New York out of college dreaming of being a writer, and then I fell into digital media completely on accident, right? It was like the job to figure out how to be a writer, but then I found I was actually a lot better at storytelling with numbers than editorial storytelling. So I just stuck with it, right?
Yeah.
And like you mentioned, right, I've gone across the Lumascape, as I like to say, right? I started out pub side at Time Inc. way back in the day, went all the way across down to the brand side, all within this data-driven marketing universe. So I've been very lucky to see what that means to all the components in the ecosystem.
Well, I'm sure that helps your position as well. And we're going to go into a little bit of the strategy side and kind of your ethos and kind of how you think about data, strategy, identity, all the great things that encompass your job. But I mean, I'm sure everyone on the call, again, we're a global company, but obviously Papa John's is also a global brand. And for anyone who doesn't know this pizza giant, it would be very strange. But can you just give us a little bit of information in terms of, the advertising and marketing strategy of Papa John's, the brand, right? Obviously, everyone knows the delicious pizza and everything else that they sell. But I want to know a little bit more about the advertising and marketing side of that organization.
Yeah, so from a paid media lens, everything is about that sight, sound, and motion content, right? Whether we're talking a linear television ad, connected television, video that's in feed in a social platform, it doesn't really matter where that video experience is coming from. It's about showing something that's sensory driven, which food is, right? Um, Watching the cheese pull as seeing the heat kind of come off things. It's so much more impactful when you're talking about a product like ours versus when you get in a banner ad, right? Even if it's a beautiful image. More broadly, we're a consumer first company, right? And so we like to use all marketing channels, whether it's paid or owned or earned, et cetera, to bring new people into our brand and to find new ways to delight our existing customers.
That sounds delicious. I wish I ate before this call. So I want to dig in a little bit in terms of just going on what the path you're headed right now about the media strategy. So I want to get a little bit nerdy in terms of ad tech, right? I think you and I can nerd out a little bit in terms of the role of building out Papa John's strategy. And so can you just tell me a little bit more? You said sight, sound, motion. Can you just give me a little bit, double click a little bit further down into that? Like, Are there specific channels you are marketing in, not marketing in? You can go as broad as you want. You don't have to go specific, but
Yeah.
is it really all about the awareness of Papa John's and getting them, in your feed, whether it's the streaming audio or seeing them on a TV screen, or are you actually looking for some direct communication from the consumers themselves, or is it a mixture?
It's a mixture. And first of all, it's a great question, right? But yeah, it's a mixture. Um, we look. There are two ways you can make money as a brand, right? You can get people who have not bought your product to buy it, or you can get people who are buying your product to buy more.
Right.
So when you think about marketing in any format, paid or otherwise, we have to recruit people into our brand, and we have to find ways to get our existing customers to want to buy one more item in their normal, purchase window or add a new purchase occasion.
Right.
And so for us, right, I think we're the air quoting upstart type pizza chain, because I mean, if you look at earnings over the past 2 years, we've been absolutely crushing it,
Mm-hmm.
and we've been growing and growing share. So it's not that people don't know who we are and we're branded to be like, hey, guess what? We're a pizza company too. But we have room to grow, right? We have the ability to actually get deeper penetration into households that might have traditionally been a Domino's or a Pizza Hut
Yeah.
type household. So there is a lot that we're doing to let people understand, here are the new and interesting products that we have. Here's what our brand stands for, and trying to make people, think of us more when it comes time to, are they going to go to McDonald's? Are they going to order pizza? Is it going to be Uber Eats? Like, what's it going to be? Trying to consider us. Now, we're also trying to be extremely intelligent about how we use our first party data when it comes to our DR efforts, right? And when you get to those DR efforts, you can be a bit more focused on things like banners and native, because these are
Right.
people who eat a lot of your food. They don't need to have the tantalizing image really to consider buying it.
Right.
You're bringing something to the table to remind them what they love, or you're introducing something, whether it's an offer or a new product, that is right in their wheelhouse.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a bit easier to just kind of find ways to show up around the addressable ecosystem as they're, looking at different forms of content, just sort of nudge them
Right.
and get them over the finish line.
And I'm going to get to the first party stuff in a minute. Obviously, this wouldn't be an InfoSum podcast. We weren't talking about first party data strategy. But really, just to talk about the specific partners you're working with. And again, not to name them by name, you can if you want. But again, it's more so the type of organizations that we've seen really grow over the past, 3 years, right? Really, since the pandemic really hit its stride, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
We've seen what we call like tier 2 publishers, emerging publishers, right? That's gaming, streaming audio, CTV, retail media networks. How have you seen those essentially helped Papa John's, if you are investing in those organizations, over the past few years to help with the sight sound motion, both from an awareness but also from a DR perspective? Have they been more willing to collaborate, more willing to try new things as this emerging market that's trying to compete with the larger walled gardens? So just what's your perspective of that?
Yeah, so I would actually argue that streaming audio and streaming television is tier 1. I think at this point that is so permeated into how consumers, live their daily lives. Whether you want to argue that it's a mature advertising channel relative to other things, like sure, we can have that argument all day.
Yeah.
But if you're a brand like ours trying to get people to, have their mouth water and want to make that order, if you're not in CTV, for example, and you're not utilizing that ability, I mean, for suppression, explicit targeting, just being in the right content environments to augment linear, because we all know that as great as linear is, it's skewing older, and you gotta have to, you have to balance everything out. If you're not in CTV, you're definitely missing.
So it's not really a try scenario anymore, right? It's not. We're out of the trying phase. This is a must-have in your media plan phase. It all just determines based on how much scale and volume you want to put into those channels, I guess, right?
Yes, exactly. Coordinating across the fragmented CTV ecosystem is it could be a whole hour worth of a podcast. We could do another time. But yeah, being in that space is definitely something you need to do. Gaming is a really interesting one to me, right? So I think there are brands who have been more involved in gaming than Papa John's and have done a good job of it. But I think most companies are still trying to figure out how to be authentic in a gaming environment. It's so different, right? If you're using a streaming TV service that has ads, that 15 or 30-second ad is something you're used to. Like, it's not weird. You may not like an ad, but like still, it's not this way out of left field experience. I think in the gaming universe, right, it's this very personal. You're in this immersed in this world, this storyline, whatever the type of game is, and to try and think about how you play around that, whether it's esports events. You have these companies that try to like put banners and billboards and stuff in games. There's so many things that you can do, and a lot of it can have a very adverse effect because gamers are not shy about saying what they like and don't like. And
You got to worry about brand safety there, I guess you could say.
Yeah. So I mean, it's fascinating. Like there's a natural alignment for sure, and we're definitely moving more in that direction. But again, you have to be very thoughtful about how you come to life in it.
Yeah,
To
pizza
not
and
alienate
gaming
the audience.
go hand in hand. I guess you would say,
Right.
but again, and it's almost the ultimate native format. I don't think we're still early on how that's going to actually be done at scale or be done in a say brand safe manner whatsoever. But I mean, obviously, there's major gaming organizations wanting to do that, and it seems like brands are looking to participate. I think it just we're just at the precipice of that really. I think taking off, at least from my own personal point of view from the clients that we work with here at InfoSum from a gaming perspective. So I want to switch gears even further, but just slightly talking about media strategy, really about data strategy. So we talked about the utilization of first-party data for things like DR, right? Needing less of that for general awareness-based campaigns. But I want to talk about first, second party, third party data, zero party data. Every number of the spectrum has its own data type, right? But to you, is it all just data by a different name, or do you see a clear difference in how the value is applied or how the data is gathered? Like, how do you kind of think about that ecosystem?
Yeah, there's definitely a difference. And so, first of all, I'm going to go on a tangent. So, zero-party data isn't a real thing, and I
Hot take.
loathe that this has become such a buzzword in the industry, right? Because all these vendors that talk about zero-party data are like, we'll help you survey your consumers, and you can map that to your CRM record. And I'm like, that's not new. Surveying consumers is not new. Surveying your own consumers is not new. Buying research is not new. This has been a thing that's been done for many, many years. It's just got a new coat of paint. So for whatever reason, it's having a moment. So I would argue if you are doing that, it's first-party data, right?
Right.
To me, right, when we talk about actual types of data, as a brand or as a publisher, right, your first-party data is your consumer level information, right? Like what you know about a real person that your company organically collects from the way it interacts with people. And it should be the lifeblood and your foundation for the type of work that you go do. Now, second party data can be extremely impactful and additive so long as the two parties are on the same page,
Right.
right?
That's a very important distinction, I think, to make, right? Second party data requires some level of either trust or some level of privacy safe engagement with that other party, because it is first party data you're talking about just in a second party context. And I think that's one of those things in the marketing playbook back in the day. I think when we both started was not a thing that people talked about. We just skipped over from first to third. And I think second is such a crucial component, especially of where we are today, right? So sorry, not to deride, but I think that's something to definitely to focus on. Anyway.
Yeah. No, I very much agree. I mean, it goes. There's stuff that's, I don't want to say like off the shelf that you can ascertain value from. And I'm talking about like what VideoAmp and iSpot and Roku have from like viewership data, for
Hmm.
example. But there's also really interesting data that can be gleaned from publisher partners if you're a brand, or like we sell Pepsi products, right? So there's stuff that we and Pepsi could be doing that's potentially interesting, right? It doesn't quite matter the actual entity you'd want to collaborate with.
Hmm.
But it's just taking a step back and thinking about how those two specific first party data sets can do something complementary, or frankly, if they can do something complementary, right? Brute forcing two data sets together for the sake of brute forcing two data sets together isn't going to help anybody.
Yeah. I completely agree. And again, you already stole the word of my next question anyway, but data collaboration, I want to double click into that too as well. Obviously, you kind of stole it out from the next question I was going to ask, but it's only April or May, depending on when this actual episode airs. But it's clear that this year specifically alone, the talk about collaboration between organizations has just been through the roof, right? I think everyone understands that looking ahead at 2023, living through a pandemic, living through everything that Google and Apple have done in terms of ID deprecation or potential ID deprecation, and then the expectation of privacy. All of these things, this culmination, this perfect storm has really led to a point where we're now starting to see people reach across the aisle, shaking hands, like you said, brand to brand, vendor to vendor, publisher to publisher. And so we're seeing collaboration really take hold as really the next evolution of our ecosystem, of our industry. And so again, putting aside competitive differences seems to be something that people are willing to do. The sharing of data, whether it's first or second or even third party data, seems to be on the rise because, reliable things like cookies are no longer there. So in terms of data collaboration, what are your predictions as we look ahead? Where is collaboration going to go? What are the use cases? And what is Papa John's looking to do with collaborating with their specific partners?
Sure. So what I fundamentally believe is that brands and publishers, and then brands and mutual business partners, again, like so my example of how we work with Pepsi,
Right.
those sorts of relationships are going to be pushed closer and closer together as more laws get signed and as more of these large tech companies like the Googles of the world pull the plug on the things they're going to pull the plug on, right? Or continue to restrict access to things.
Yeah.
And that makes me happy. I love that's where this is going, right? Um, and I think it's not because people are like, oh my gosh, I can't click the easy Google button anymore. Now I have to figure this out. I think it's really just an awakening to the fact that premium content providers, big brands that have a strong connection to consumers, sit on a lot of the best actual information that is out there.
Yeah.
And instead of just throwing money at third party data and the infinite reach that was never actually infinite reach on the internet in the first place, right?
The promise, right?
Yeah,
This
exactly.
promise of one to
Yeah,
one, one to many, one to
yeah,
everyone. Yeah.
yeah. It's just to make everybody just take a step back and say, okay, well, what were we trying to do in the first place? Okay, I want someone to buy a pizza, and I want them to be able to see this video ad, and this place over here
Hmm.
is really well lit premium content. A lot of people are going to watch, and I want to get my ad on that page, right? You don't need 40 different technology players and 15 third-party data segments to do that work. You need to have a thoughtful discussion between brand and publisher and to figure out what a mutually beneficial strategy for data application actually is.
Right.
And I think to make sure I don't stray too far from your question,
It's fine.
what I'm really excited about and what I think is going to happen over the next 2 years is a lot of the bad tech that's out there
Ooh.
is just going to get it's going to just be wiped off the map, right? There's a lot of folks out there who are sort of hiding in the shadows or doing something to be somewhat relevant,
Yeah.
are just hanging on by a thread until some of these changes come along. And I think that great culling of these bad actors is going to catapult the kind of things we were just talking about forward because people who may have been afraid
Hmm.
to get in this game and figure it out are going to have to.
Right. No, that's a perfect, and again, another soundbite. The bad tech. I love that. And so again, we're seeing all these changes. I just listed all of the changes that we've seen over the past few years in a row. And we hear this from every time you hear in a podcast like this, or you see someone on stage or on a webinar, everyone's talking with the same like core, issues that we're running into. But it seems like this can be reframed as an opportunity. That's essentially kind of what I'm seeing from you, is that this is a return to basics. This is a return to actual strategic thinking, right? When you're actually doing a collaborative effort between one party or multiple parties. So are you seeing that, what other types of things have actually opened up for marketers, and really what has opened up for Papa John's in this new horizon? Are there things that you're thinking about differently now than you have before, because you have to, but also because it's a really interesting opportunity that you're seeing in front of you?
Yeah. So for me, what's kind of become apparent, like just because of the places we've mutually worked, right,
Mm-hmm.
and then just being someone who actually reads the trades for our industry.
Yeah.
Uh, there's a lot of confusion out there. A lot of people are worried. I think a lot of concerns are a bit inflated, right, about what's happening in the near term versus the long term. It's just sort of hysteria right now, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think what's good about this is it's forced people who were in that this is the way we've always done it. Don't talk to me about something new camp
Yeah.
to just finally give in and say, I don't know where this stuff is going. There are too many things to keep up with. What should we be doing? What do we have to go focus on? And once that happens, a lot of great creative thinking and interesting work can start being done. And a lot of what we want to do, and you know, this is our personal opinion, my personal opinion. It may not be the norm, but if we're trying to get back to this conversation, brand to brand, brand to publisher,
Mm-hmm.
and what that mutual value proposition is, it has to start on the media planning side versus the activation side, right? What we've lived through the past several years with the rise of RTB and everything else is people defaulting to the tool to make the buying decision and being disintermediated by the ad tech ecosystem
Yeah.
versus what is it I'm trying to do from a planning aspect, right? Like we're creating as brands, you're creating these big beautiful stories of how you want your content to come to life and the things you want it to drive, and then you had this, in my opinion, often a break from what that theory is to what you put into practice because you had this sort of the use of the kind of data like first party data and then the measurement systems that are out there was isolated to these activation platforms,
Yeah.
and it really wasn't a media planning tool. So again, you had like consumer research driving a plan, first party data driving activation, and there was no real connection at the end of the day. You were kind of trying to force it. What I'm really excited about is we can correct all that, right? Because there's a lot of great stuff that has been built over time on that activation side, but it should be secondary to what the plan is trying to accomplish. And if I can simply, easily understand between like me and a major publisher partner of my database and the content they own, where are my people like active across their content
Yeah.
and where do I have little to no penetration? That tells me two things. Where can I recruit new customers? Where do I talk to my existing customers? And you can build very thoughtful plans and go much deeper on what kind of data you want to use and how you want to activate and all those other things. But it's setting you up from the get go to have that very thoughtful, very impactful way of bringing your media to life. And it doesn't sound that game breaking, but I think if people are honest in our industry, it it actually is because we skipped over that and just went straight to pressing buttons.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's really like three sides of this as well, right? And so you kind of unpack that. Obviously, first party data has never been as important as it is now, and it's always been important, right? I don't think that we don't want to forget that first party data, the relations you have with your customer, and the information they're giving about you, about themselves at that point in time, and then updating that on a consented basis over time is, like you said, the lifeblood of any B2C organization. There's nothing better than having that loyal connection and having that constant stream of accurate information about them and what they want to do. The second thing is what we've gained from the programmatic RTP ecosystem is this concept of automation, right? This concept of speed, this concept of efficiency. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't see any of that going away, or I don't want any of that to go away. But I think, as you said, really the key thing that we've left on the table when we're doing RTB and programmatic and all those other things is that media planning, the media strategy. How can I make sure that I'm building a plan that makes the most sense both for my customers, if I'm a brand, and your customers if you're a publisher? And how can we really kind of work together to make the most out of our overlap, make the most out of the consumers or customers that neither one of us has been able to reach, and then learn over time, right? And I think that concept of connectivity and insight generation is something that we really have left to robots, I guess you could say, right? To left to spreadsheets. And I think we are at a huge opportunity to do that. But my question to you through all of that is, I feel like it's such a daunting task for many organizations to think about injecting more people and more brain power into that strategy. What would you say to those individual organizations who may be reticent to jump in or to invest people, or feel that they're actually like losing market share or losing money or time by having to do this maybe publisher by publisher or network by network?
Well, what I would go back to is my kind of quip that the internet is not infinite, right? If you feel like sitting down and developing these deeper relationships and planning out something at a more intimate level is a waste of your time, you're probably out there buying a lot of fraudulent inventory or in ad slots that are unseen, or talking to people who have no desire to buy your product or can potentially buy your product in the first place, right?
Yeah, sounds like a lot of waste to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like, if you want something of quality, it's like going on a diet, trying to build muscle in the gym, right? You can't just say, all right, I want to be like totally ripped and then just wake up and be ripped. You have to go in and you have to lift weights and you have to eat right, and it takes time, and you build skill sets. And as the more time you invest in that, the faster you can crank out those reps, right? And the more weight you can push. Like it's a skill set you have to build and invest in. But is that really different than anything you've had to do as a company before?
Yeah.
Right? You've had to build different disciplines. You've had to adapt as different things, depending on how old your company is, as massive shifts, in how the world works have occurred over time.
Because RTD programmatic's less than 15 years old, right?
Yeah, dude.
How long's advertising existed? Hundreds of years? Like
exactly.
Thousands of years?
Dude, RTB is younger than the iPhone, right? Like the smartphone had come out 2 years before RTB hit like the mainstream, right? And I think that's fascinating, because if you try to parallel path the radical growth and changes, good and bad, in something like programmatic advertising, along with how something like the smartphone has dramatically changed how consumers interact with the world, I think it's a really fascinating example of how the level of disruption that we've experienced, it's not because people have been dumb or unthoughtful, but truly because people have been trying to find that way to have that cohesive connection to a consumer across all these different touch points in a world where it consistently seems to become more and more fractured.
Yeah.
A lot of fun stuff you could kind of pull out and write about a topic like that.
Well, I just think it's a little bit chasing your tail, right? Because again, we've always been chasing fragmentation. It's all about centralization, consolidation, getting the single perfect view of your customer. That's never been obtainable. We both know, working at former, MTA organizations, that it really is a pipe dream. There's really great things you can get out of an MTA strategy, 100%, right? But having that single perfect view is never obtainable, and because it's almost like consumers are actively trying to avoid it, right? Whether they physically are trying to actively avoid it. I think former colleagues of ours definitely are purposefully trying to duck the system by
Yeah.
creating an email address for every single website they visit. That's definitely on the one
Yes.
crazy end of the spectrum. And then you
Yes.
have probably many of our parents who have a single email address they use for everything. Great, right? And there's probably most people are in
Yeah.
between. But there's no reason why we should be spending, I think, so much time, energy, wasted investments on this perfect vision, this perfect consolidated view, when you can execute really powerful marketing and advertising by just focusing on developing those core relationships, even if it is going to be fragmented. And I think
Yeah.
that's okay, because I think customers see brands in different ways based on how they're consuming that information. And maybe they don't want to see a certain brand anywhere on their search feed or anywhere on their mobile device, but then maybe when they go, into a store or in a cab or something else, they want to see that experience. And I think let's let the consumers and customers make that decision, and then let's let the publishers let us know, because they're the ones closest to that point of engagement, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, let's be honest. A lot of the ways we consume content now, you have an ad-free or an ad-supported option.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you could pull out every single person in the US and have a transparent data, like pseudonymized database of all of them, your opportunity to talk to them from an omnichannel perspective is completely predicated on whether or not they can allow, whether or not they're going to allow ads in that given environment. And
Yeah.
no two people are going to necessarily be, well, some people will be the same, right? But I mean, you know what I'm saying, right? Like there's not like a one size fits all approach. So it really is about, it's not about perfection. It's about what is good enough and what can quality information about where and how you can bring your messages to life in places where people are going to be, right? That in and of itself should be the driver that brings you into whatever channels that ends up bringing you to,
Yeah.
more so than trying to say, if I get X amount of impressions in these 15 different environments, I will magically grow my sales, because that's not how it works.
And again, I hate to be a broken record or speak truth to the organization I currently work for, but it really does come back down to the collaboration concept, right? It's almost like, again, especially with Papa John's working with their multiple publishers, it's almost like going to a country or a city in a country you've never been to, but you have a friend there who knows the landscape. They know where to eat, they know where to dine. That's the same thing, but they know where to shop. They know where the cool bars are at. And I feel like collaboration is just allowing you to peek into a customer set that you probably know and probably have a relationship with, but you would never know that unless you had a translation layer like a publisher, right? And I think that's really where we're getting to, what it seems like when we're using technology like clean rooms and other types of these environments where these organizations can come together, build a relationship, shake hands, and they can start to get to work and roll up their sleeves. And hey, we have these customers in line with each other. Let me share you a little bit more about what's going on with this customer base. You show me a little bit more about your customer base. Everything's remaining completely safe and secure. But I think that's really the next step, is developing these symbiotic, cohesion type relationships through data collaboration. That wasn't really a question. That's kind of how I'm seeing it. But I do want to go into how do we make sure this is all protected and connected and making sure it's secure. And so I really talk about the balance of privacy and performance, right? I think it's really, really important for any marketing organization to think about their balance, right? And depending what country you live in, it may skew one level, one direction or the other. But before we get into the mechanisms, I want to talk about kind of the mindset of going into these types of trusted relationships. And so from your perspective, like, what is a B2C organization like Papa John's role in the protection and security of that first party customer data?
Yeah, so flat out, if you are an organization that collects consumer data, you are liable to keep it safe and to avoid, within all reasonable expectations, the leakage of that data in a harmful way. There is nothing but that, right? And if you're an organization that thinks that because you pass data off to a third party and it's on them now, even if you can deflect a lawsuit because of how your contract is set up,
Right.
it's the consumer is not going to blame the third party they've never heard of unless they're in our industry. They're blaming you. So if you are not taking things seriously and being very, very focused in where your data goes out and what kind of data comes in, and the level of access internally and externally to that data, like you are setting yourself up to fail. Because look, the way the new normal is going to be, the relationship with your consumer and their desire to continue to consent and opt in to sharing information is going to be equally important to the quality and consistency of the product you're selling them.
100% agree with you. It should be that simple, and it is that simple, right? Specifically in the B2C world. And so in terms of the protection of that data, obviously there's concept of data governance practices. Some organizations are hiring a chief privacy officer. Is it a singular person or organization or department that it is their role to take on that responsibility when, evaluating partners or even evaluating, their own internal practices? Or maybe this is a leading question, or is it more responsibility of every person working at that organization or somewhere in between? Like, what is your personal opinion, or if Papa John's has their specific,
Sure.
kind of position?
Yes. I mean, it's a little bit of the adage, it takes a village, right?
Yeah.
You need at least one person from a business, like a marketing and consumer data analytics, CRM, right, type function who knows what the data is and how it
Mm-hmm.
goes and gets used, right? You need at least one person from a legal and privacy standpoint to look at things from a this is what the laws are saying or how we're interpreting it, and here's what we believe to be a risk to our company. And then I think, you know, you need you need to have a good understanding of who the key external stakeholders are in the application of your data, right? Every company is different, right? You may be a smaller company and you can't have the luxury of owning all your own contracts and,
Mm-hmm.
controlling everything. You got to use your agency or some other contracted third party. And that's fine. But if you're trying to construct a strategy that protects data and you're not thinking about how that company you're giving data to is using it,
Mm-hmm.
and they're the core activator of it, let's just say, you're really, really missing something. So again, from a business lens, you have to think about what do you want to use that data for? What data is actually necessary versus what's not,
Yep.
right? Because depending on your company, you can gain thousands of data points down to one or two. You can't use everything. What's good? Where do you want to bring it to life? How do you get that data there? If it's a message you want to bring to someone, like what are the conduits to do that? How are those things protected? And then along the way, your legal team is there not so much to validate your marketing plan, but to say this is a risk, this is not a risk. This is in line with the law, this is not in line with the law. And look, that stuff is not easy. A lot of companies are learning. Like, frankly, we're all learning what these laws mean in real time, right? They're coming and changing so quickly. No one can be a true expert in the sense of the word, right? You have people who can be exposed to these to privacy law and things have happened in Europe and CCPA and everything. But like as more things come to light, we're all learning, so we have to take a step back and remember it's not about being perfect out of the gate. It's about attempting to hold the spirit of these laws up and continue to try to get better with it, building that muscle memory.
Mm-hmm.
And the skill set will come, and your consumers will actually appreciate it because you're going to be so much further down the road in meeting them in the place they want to be in terms of what they want you to use their data for versus how they want you to protect it relative to folks who are going to sit on their hands until someone gets sued.
And so I want to talk a little bit, in the time we have left. This isn't easy, right? I think there's two ways that again we can think about this. There's the legal sense, right, and making sure the data you collect is consented, making sure that the data remains consented. You have doing right to opt out, right to deletion, all those requests that customers and consumers are legally allowed to request on with an organization. Different scrutinies that are placed based whether it's CPRA eventually in America or GDPR. But when it comes to actual, like, okay, I'm an organization, you're an organization, we want to actually collaborate together and actually do some level of insight generation. I think that's an area of specificity. I think it gets lost because it's such a new concept, right? I think everyone today is so familiar with the concept. All right, I'm going to build a data lake. I'm going to throw all this data into it, first, second, third party data.
Yeah.
I'm going to have these data science teams that are super expensive and really difficult to maintain, but I have to build them to mine through the data and collect all these insights. And we both know, again, working at data science focused organizations, that's really difficult to do. It takes a long time. It's expensive. Yeah. I think what you're getting at is that I think the ease of use of collecting the insights is extremely important. And I think how fast you can generate those insights is also extremely important, right? To make sure that, if we're heading down this path of, privacy safe, privacy centricity, we need to make sure it's essentially worth the squeeze if we're a marketing organization. And that's going to come in the form of ROI, ROAS, all the different types of, multiple acronym KPIs. Mm-hmm. And we need to generate those quickly. And we need to get people thinking in that direction. And so all of that being said, I want to transition to thinking about the mechanisms of actual collaboration, the mechanisms of actual computation, right? Actually doing the math across data sets and extracting those insights. And so there's a multitude of different ways in which we can describe that data. I think the most common right now is the data clean room, right? An environment where multiple parties can come together, they can connect their data, they can extract insights, and they can either activate the data if that's what they want to do, they can measure, they can build different types of models. And so what's just your point of view on there? Like, what's your point of view on actual privacy first tech that marketers are now investing in? You are one of those marketers, hopefully investing in that world. Give us a little insight into where you see that landscape today, where you see it going, and where the pitfalls or opportunities are for anyone listening.
Yeah, so I think, we have to acknowledge that where we're at today, right, like the current set of market leaders in privacy compliance, right, the companies that have been around for like basically since RTB's inception, we're talking about LiveRamp, Neustar, Experian, et cetera. Those entities, right, they're sort of in that pseudonymization and control and orchestration of their customers' data, right? So you pass it off and they find a way to match it to what they know, and then they hand it off, and they're essentially like the switchboard operator for data sets. And that is all well and good. And there's a lot of things you can do with that are protecting your clients, are protecting your customers and your clients. Yeah. But I think what we're moving towards and what we're seeing with, what's happened in Europe and how things are changing here in the US is that probably won't be enough in the mid to long term. And I think what you're going to really see is this need to have much more direct control of the data owners themselves in a confined environment with predetermined use cases for how that data is leveraged, and then rules and governance around when and how data is deleted, how it's brought together, all those sorts of things, which may not sound too different than what the onboarders do, but there is a real nuance there in that instead of it being handed off to the third party to then have them process and kick out, what you're essentially moving to is an entity that helps you mix and match data directly with the partner or subset of partners you need to in an environment wholly owned between you and those entities, right? Completely independent of that broader ID spine the traditional players have, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So it's more fluid. So it almost seems like it's also more of a temporary instance, it seems, right? So if you're trying to build a campaign with a subset of publishers, why not spin up a clean room? We can do a collaboration, and then we can go about our day. And you can re-engage with that experience if you'd like to. But I mean, that's how I think about a clean room environment, as a temporary instance that allows a specific group of like-minded marketers to work together for some end goal. And, whether it's a publisher owned and operated clean room, whether it's a brand owned and operated clean room, or some, intermediary. That's actually a question I have for you. Like, who would own the clean room? Like, who should be responsible for what's happening and the permissions? Is it one party, all parties, a mixture of parties? I'm just curious your point of view. I mean, again, this is new area, so I'm very curious, like, where you would like it to be.
Yeah,
as well.
So So this is where it's a little wonky, I think, what I believe it should be, but I think ultimately the technology vendor you're utilizing to mix and match data, delete data when necessary, control levels of exposure, noise generation, etc. There's a base set of standards and rules that have to exist within the contract with that entity, right?
Right.
A certain set of liability on them for being the one that wants to process those things in that confined
The
environment.
cleaner and operator you're talking about?
Yes, the cleaner operator. Thank you. And to me, that's more of like the logistics portion has to be owned by the clean room operator.
Yeah.
And I think the users of the clean room, right, they have to define the rules around what can go in, how it should be used, and what the expected output really needs to be. Uh, that might sound really difficult. I think it's difficult for the clean room operator, right, more so than it is for the folks who want to use it, because is understanding what data you want to use and how that much different than saying,
Yeah.
where do I want to place my ad, why, in which places? It really isn't, right? Um, it's frankly a much more transparent and thoughtful way of doing the song and dance that's done traditionally, right? Because look, I can go back to my time as a publisher and getting RFPs, trying to beat out ESPN to get inventory sold on Sports Illustrated, right?
Hmm.
And the thing we're hearing is like the agency wants more reach. We have to figure out how to get more reach. Going into the audience tools we had on site and manipulating the rules to make the different segments we were supposed to provide become larger, right? Like making them less stringent. Um, I bring that up to say there is this song and dance today when you're not completely transparent with one another, where the publisher is trying to win your business, doesn't quite know everything that's going on. So they might be incentivized to take that shortcut, like I just mentioned, in whatever aspect they can. Then conversely, some brands are holding back information and trying to find ways in which to gain unnecessary leverage,
Yeah.
right, against a publisher.
It's like
You're,
you're not
you're
showing
losing
all
it.
of your cards, all right? It's a little
Yeah,
bit of poker that you have to
right.
play, even though
Yeah.
you have a beneficial relationship in the current state of the way the tech stack works. There's still a little bit of holding out because you don't necessarily trust that other actor, or there's something else to gain individually, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I get it to a point, but in the confines of what clean rooms are promising, should the functionality truly exist and
Hmm.
the various ways in which clean room operators are developing privacy safe workflows,
Right.
functionally they're supposed to, it makes it much easier to do that, right? I mean, and you and I know this from, when I was a new start client, right? The amount of times when I was at Coke, we were trying to get people to do data collaboration, and the response was, "You can give me your data, I will give you something back."
Right.
And then I would kind of retort of like, "Why can't I have your data, mix it with mine, and give you something back?"
Hmm.
The response then being, "Well, it's not, we take our consumers' privacy very seriously. There's data leakage. We can't possibly share our data." To which I would say, so is our consumers' privacy not important that we can
Right.
give it to you? And then the
Exactly.
conversation would devolve, right?
Yeah.
And again, like it's because there wasn't that easy place to bring this information, to have all those legal safeguards, to have the honest dialogue around what the two parties know. And I
Hmm.
think the long term massive benefit we're going to have from this concept of the clean room is being able to have that conversation, and then all the great work that can come from that, right?
Right.
Because I mean, like, look, of course, measurements in my title. I've not really talked a lot about measurement in the concept of the clean room, because first, I just want to get the planning structure built in a way that's going to drive value, and all the other stuff is going to come. The way you want to build models with your publishers and other partners to do differentiated segmentation will come. What form of closed loop versus like mini MTA universes you create with a subset of partners will come. All that will
Yeah.
appear over time. but it will not appear until the dollars shift into this way of working. And the dollars won't shift until the planning in and of itself
Yeah.
really stems from this type of collaboration.
I completely agree. And again, I'm not going to say easy button in the sense that privacy is easy. Privacy is and never should be easy. But if like InfoSum and our point of view from a data collaboration, clean room partner of the ecosystem is that you shouldn't have to worry about privacy if the right technology is in place. So you can just worry about the strategy. I think that's extremely important for marketers. And I think it's really important for marketers to think about when they're planning their future strategies is not to worry about the privacy tech, right? There should be standards. There should be, baseline barrier to entries for any privacy tech to be used in a clean room context. And I think they were still working on educating the market of that. But I think let's get back to the strategy and let's just assume that the privacy tech is working as it should, as long as it's been vetted by the right people and individuals.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, just saying absolutely, right? And I think the concept we're talking about in this clean room universe, I think it's inviting your InfoSec team and other entities to get under the hood a bit more than what we've seen historically.
Yep.
So, I think if you can bring the right people from those sort of entities in
Yeah.
and to get their buy-off, and you can have the kind of dialogue and results you want with the partners who would bring data to the table there, you would have to assume that things are working as they should, and you can focus on deriving value.
That's it. Yeah.
Versus, trying to do whack-a-mole with data leakage.
There should be nothing to hide, right? I mean, I think just like we do an RFP, RFI process, same thing should happen for the clean room vendor of your choice when you're looking to do any investments. And again, that's our recommendation at InfoSum is if you want to learn more about the technology, ask the questions, get the right people to ask the questions, bring your tech folks in, bring your InfoSec people in, bring your privacy experts in. Because if the privacy tech is real, if it's valuable, then there should be nothing to hide behind. And you shouldn't, because again, it's privacy. And like my old adage term, they always says you don't F with privacy, and you need to make sure that is buttoned up, and then focus on the strategic efforts that you're putting forth, with your partners. So that's my sign off. You'll see that signature moving forward. So again, I just want to thank you for joining the show. If there's anything else that we didn't cover, we can have you back on to chat about in the future. But Chris Hawk, thanks for taking the time with us to talk about clean rooms, data collaboration, eliminating the bad tech. A lot of good snippets that we got from you today. So thank you, sir.
Thanks again for having me. I had a blast, and I look forward to the next time.
Thanks again to Chris for joining us for this episode of Identity Architects. It felt like there was a ton more we could have dived into, especially around the role of privacy-enhancing technologies, so a round 2 should definitely be on the books. If you'd like to be a guest on Identity Architects, or if you'd like to nominate someone to be on the podcast, don't forget that you can reach out to us on podcasts@infosum.com. All that leaves for me to do is to remind you to hit that subscribe button so you know when the next episode of Identity Architects lands. But until then, thanks for listening.